And also, if any questions, so there's a chat function in Crowdcast. So please put your questions or whatever else you want to say in the chat. There's also a separate Q&A section. So whichever you prefer, you can put questions there as well. All right. All right. Cool. So again, we're going to build a flow that will send in the notification to Slack when an event happens in Okta, and that's the example we're going to build. Okay. So what you're looking at, you are looking at the workflows, and then I've got a lot of folders on the left-hand side here. If you're just starting, you're not going to have a list of folders. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to collapse it, so just a little bit. So yeah, it's not in the screen. But I'm inside a folder. I have a flow here that I created earlier, but I'm going to create a new flow. And then to create a new flow, you click this new flow button, right? And in the upper left here, click there to give the flow a name. So notify. We'll just keep it simple. Notify flow. It's usually a good idea to give it a description, but we'll just use the same notify flow, right? I'm going to check this option here, and this will allow me to save the data as I test the flow. So every run is gonna save the data for that run, right? I'm gonna click save. Okay, so we created a new flow. We gave it a name, we gave it a description, and then we also configure it to save data when we test the flow. Okay. Let me quickly check if there are any questions. All right. So yes, Simon is asking, will this video be shared? So absolutely. And once we end this session, the recording will be available on exactly the same page, right? So you can come back to Crowdcast and watch the replay here, and then also tomorrow it will be on YouTube. And I'll send the message with a link to YouTube. So, all right. Well, back to our flow. So we got a flow. Now, the first thing usually is like, hey, how do you trigger a flow? Like, what do you need to do to actually run this flow, right? So there are a number of ways to trigger or run a flow, okay? Now, the first one is when an event happens, right? And that's the case we're going to be using today, is when an event happens in Okta, okay? So what I do is that it says here, when this happens, I'm going to click Add Event. Okay, and then what I see, this is a list of connectors that Workflows has. Okay, now every connector will support various events that you can use to trigger a flow. Right now, also just to give you kind of it says connected apps here, and then it says all apps. So this is all the connectors that have exposed events that I can use to trigger a flow. And here, connected apps, these are connectors for which I created the connection. So you got a connector, and then you have to create a connection to it, right? You have to authenticate, and so that's when it becomes a connected app, right? So I already have Okta. We'll be using Okta here. I already have Okta. And then if I click on Okta, then you can see a long list of events on which I can trigger a flow. Okay, if I go back just to show you, let's say Gmail. Now, the other connectors will have less events that they support. So as you can see, Gmail supports only 2 events here, which you can use to trigger a flow. Okay, so I'm going to go back. So this is option number 1 is when an event happens in the system. Option number 2 is on schedule. So you can run an event on schedule, and then I'm going to show you. And then schedule. You select this option, and then you can configure to run as often, I think it's 5 minutes, every hour, every day, and every week. Okay. So I'm going to delete this. And another option is an API endpoint. Okay, so what this, I'm going to delete this in a second, but what this allows us to do is you can have another system called an API endpoint, which will in turn trigger this flow. Okay, so again, an external system calls an API point, passes whatever information, and then in turn calls this flow. Let's hope for number 3. I'm going to mention one more option, and that's you can also do a helper flow. Now, a helper flow is when another flow calls a flow. Okay, and I have a lot of examples. We did a lot of videos. If you go to the YouTube channel, and again, I'm going to share it in the message that I sent, but we have a lot of videos where we use helper flows. But so just to review, the options are, we have an event, happens in the system. We have a schedule, we have API endpoint, and then we have a helper flow. So there are other actually ways to trigger a flow, but these are the main 4, the most common ways you would start to trigger a flow. Okay, now back to our example, we're using an event in Okta, so I'm going to select Okta. Now, I already have a connection to Okta, so that's why it's listed in the connected apps. Now, in the event that I'm going to use, and you can search, I mean, this is a long list of events. I'm going to say created, user created. So what I want to do is I want to trigger a flow. I want to do something when a user is created. Okay. Now, I have this card, and you can see this is all the information that the event makes available to me. Okay, so there is some date and time, there is an ID, there's the admin. So for example, that's the person, that's the admin who creates the user. And then the Okta user, that's the user that the admin created. Okay, and of course, every event will have different information that it has available to you. Okay. Now, once I add this card, what I actually like to do is to test this right away. Just, hey, let me see if this actually works. Like, will I get, when I create a new user, will I actually see this information here? Okay, so let's do that. Well, let me switch back to see if there are any questions. All right, I don't see any questions, so that's good. Okay, so first I'm going to, right here, turn this flow on. Okay, and now this option, if you remember, I turned this option on when I was giving a flow a name, but it's again, save all data that passes through the flow, right? So again, every time I run the flow, it will save the data, so I can come back and look like, hey, what data was used for this run and for this run and for this run. So this is very helpful for debugging and testing the flow. But I need to turn the flow on. All right, it says activating flow. Sometimes it's very quickly, sometimes it takes a little bit more time. Still activating. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, all right, now it's on. I need to go to my Okta dashboard. So I'm going to go here in Okta dashboard. And actually, I need to sign in. I think I forgot to do that. So let me sign in. All right. Okay, and I'm going to go to directory, and I'm going to go to people. Right. So I have 8 people so far in my organization, and now I'm going to create a new person. And I have a little cheat sheet that I have some users that I'm going to use. So let's do first Mary. So I'm going to use Mary here, copy the email, and I'm going to click add person, and then Mary Green. I'm going to copy the email, and then I'm also going to use a secondary email here, and I'm just going to put 2 here, right? That's all I need, and I'm going to click save. So again, when I click save, I'm going to go here, right? And I'm going to be able to see this event, this flow triggered, okay? And I'm in the flow view now. To see how the flow runs, I need to switch to the execution flow. I'm sorry, execution history. Now, there's nothing here yet because I haven't clicked to add the person. Let me go here and click save. All right, so I created a user. And sometimes, again, when you go back to this view, it could take a few seconds, sometimes even longer, for the flow to get invoked. But we can see right here there's a success execution, and we can see this card shows us the data from this run, right? And we can see, for example, the admin, so that's myself, right? So that's the person who created the user, right? And then and what I do is that when you put the mouse over in the upper right corner, and then you'll see the two arrows, and then you can see. And so this is the user that I created, right? So it's Mary Green, and this is all the information that the event makes available to us. Okay. But what's really neat is that we tested the flow, right? It works, it gets triggered when a new user is created. Okay, so next I want to create a message, and then I'm going to send it to Slack. All right, so let's work on that. Let me just see if any questions. All right, no questions. Okay, so this is the first step. The next step is I want to use something to create a text. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a function, right? And so what a function card allows me to do is it's a step that interacts or changes data, right? And there are various categories that you can see here. There's branching, error handling, flow control, and then you can work with text, numbers, true and false, date and time, object, files, and lists. All right. Now, because I want to create text, I'm going to go to text. And then in this category, you can see all the functions that you can take. The one I need is compose. It says enter freeform text. So this is the one I want to use. Okay. Now, I'm going to delete this. What I usually do also is, well, first of all, you can search here, right? If you know the name of the card and you don't want to browse the categories, you can always search. Also, there is a most popular category, which decomposes here, right? So it's a card that's used a lot, and so it's in the most popular. It's in the first one, right? And I'm going to say new user, right? And let's say name, and I'm going to say email, and secondary email. Okay, so that's, now I need to somehow get the data that we saw into this card. So how do you do that? Well, what you do is you take a field from a previous card and you can sort of drop it or connect it to the next card. That's one of my favorite capabilities in workflows. So I'm going to take display name, right? And if you're not sure, like, oh, what is display name? So what I do is I go back to history, and well, let me just look again. So I see Okta user and I open it and I say, oh, display name is the value that I need, right? So I do this all the time because if you're not sure what the value holds. Okay, so I'm going to go back to flow, and then I'm going to take display name. The only thing you have to be careful, because this is the admin, that's the person who created the user, but what we want is the Okta user, right? So we're going to display name, and I'm going to drag and drop it like this. Okay, so when the flow runs, it's going to take the value and pass it to this card. Now for the email, I'm going to use this, the alternate ID, and I'm going to drag like this. Now I want the secondary email. If you remember, I said the secondary email, but I'm looking here and it's not available. Okay, so the event doesn't expose that property. Okay, so I mean, I can just delete this field and just say, I'm not going to display it. But of course, we want to be able to display it. So what we're going to do is that we're going to add another step, and we're going to read user information. And then that step will actually give us that secondary email information, right? So to do that, I'm going to click the plus here. And then this one here is the function. So if I wanted to place another function, I could do that. This one here allows me to add a note. So this is like a comment. So we can say read user information. And then here I'm going to click the cloud icon. And now this looks very similar to what you saw before. This is the list of connectors that Workflows provides. Okay, so under all apps, this is the list of connectors. You can see there are a lot of connectors available. And now at the top here, this is connected apps. So these are all the connectors for which I created the connection. Okay, so you got connectors, and then you can create multiple connections for a connector. So for example, you can have a connection to the testing environment, to maybe production environment, or any other environment that you need, right? So you have one connector, and then you can have multiple connections, right? Now, because we're working with Okta organization here, I'm going to use the Okta connector, and I already have a connection, and then I'm going to search for the action that I want, and that's read user, right? Right. And the connection information is right here. It's just, I call the connection Okta preview. It's still just loading the card. So let me switch for now if there are any questions. All right, no questions. All right. And then so the card has one input. As you can see, it says user ID and it's required. And then the card has a lot of outputs. Okay, you can see there's a long list of outputs. Now, I don't need these outputs in this particular example. So I'm going to actually uncheck them all here. All right. What I do need is I need the username. I want the first name, the last name. I want the primary email, and I want the secondary email. Okay. So again, you can decide what fields you want to show. And I'm going to click Save. Okay. Now, if you ever need to go back and, okay, I need to display a field, you select the gear, and then you select Choose Fields. And then, sorry, you're just reading the metadata. And so just taking a few seconds here. And it should be faster. I'm not sure why it's taking so long. All right. So you can go back and then check whatever fields you want to display. All right. Cool. So this card. Now, when I add a card like this, what I also like to do is to test the card, right? So we tested the flow at the very beginning, but you can also test individual cards. And what you need is we need the user ID. So I'm going to go back to history. And I'm going to scroll down here to Okta user. And I'm going to take this ID. This is the user ID. I'm going to copy it. Go back to the flow. And I'm going to click run. And then I'm going to paste the ID. And I'm going to click run to test the card. All right. And it works, right? I got the information about the user. And so I like to do this almost for all the cards when I build the flow. And again, I encourage you to do the same. So what I'm going to do now, I need to pass the ID. So again, I'm going to go to Okta user. So again, just be careful because there's the admin and Okta user. It's very easy to use this ID. What you could do is just collapse this and then take the Okta user ID and map it like this. Okay. And now that we have this information, I'm going to take the secondary email and do it, create the message, right? If you wanted to, you could test the message, but this is pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to do it here. All right. Again, the gear here allows you to choose the fields. Okay. Then run this card allows you to test the card. What I also use a lot is the helper icon here. Is that you click on help, and then what it does is that it opens a new window, and it gives you the documentation about the card. So I use that a lot because I don't remember how every card works, or if you need to find out like what the particular field does. Okay, so I use that a lot. So every card will have a little question mark. You can click on it, and it will open a window with the documentation about that card. All right. Now the last step is we need to send this to Slack, and so I'm going to use an app action. So again, Actions, these are actions with a connector, right? And then functions, these are the cards or functions that manipulate data. And I'm going to click Add App Action. And so Slack is right here. So Slack is already connected. But actually, I'm going to show you how to create a connection to Slack. I'm going to use that. And so these are the actions that Slack supports. And the one I need is send message to channel. Right? And see here, so it's still loading the card. So I'm going to use the channel. So I have one connection, so it uses that connection. I'm going to use this channel. I'm going to keep everything here as is, and I'm going to click Save. Right? And so here it's asking me, well, the message is required, and then there is an optional attribute thread timestamp. So I don't actually need it, so I'm going to uncheck it. And then the output is I think when the message was sent. That's fine. I'm going to click Save. Okay. Now, again, the connection information, and I was going to show it to you here and I forgot, but the connection information is right here, Okta Preview. And then the Slack, the connection is here, right? So you have, again, a connector, and then there's a connection to Slack. Now, let me show you how to create a new connection. So you click that, and this is the existing connection. And then I'm going to click New Connection, right? And I'm going to call this Slack 2, give it a name. And I'm going to click Create. Now, I don't know if you can see the screen, but it opens a window where it's asking me to give access to Okta Workflows to the Slack instance. So it's very similar when you log in with Google or a similar service. And then what I'm doing is I'm basically saying that I selected the wrong one. Sorry, let me cancel. Create. I'm selecting my Slack instance, and I'm saying yes, workflows can access the Slack instance. And I'm saying allow, and it lists the permissions that it has. All right, and we can see now I'm using Slack 2 connection. And it's going to read the channels again because it's a new connection, so it needs to read the. So let's do that. Same channel, save. All right, but let's test this, right? So before we test the flow, let's test this card so we can send the message to Slack. So I'm going to click Test, and we'll say hello from Workflows, and click Run. And then I'm going to go to right here. This is the message that was sent, right? Hello from Workflows, right? And this is the timestamp. So, right, again, the card works. That's what we want. And now what I need to do is take the message here that I created and connect it like this. What I also like to do is the default output field is called output, and I like to give it a better name. So there's, it's a little bit more straightforward to understand when you come back to the flow later. So you can rename this, and then if you put the mouse over the type, right, the text, the type, and click Customize, you can say Slack message, click Save, and then the message, the field changes here, and then the field changes here. So you don't need to rename it in two places. It just automatically updates. All right. But I think we're ready to test the entire flow. So we got, again, a new user is created. Then that event will trigger this flow. This is like a comment, nothing else here. And then we're going to read the user information because we need additional information that the event doesn't provide. So we're going to read user information. We will create a message, and then we send the message to Slack. All right, so let's save this. And let's go to, let's say, Maya here. So let's copy Maya. Let's go to people. Oh, kick me out. Okay, let's sign in back. All right. So people, let's add a person, and that's Maya. And then secondary email. Okay. And let's click save. Let's go back to the flow. Let's go to execution history. All right, and we can see there's a second run now. And if I look here, right, so this is the event that triggered. And I can open the Okta user, and now it says Maya here. I mean, this is just a note card, so it doesn't do much. Then the read user, right, we are providing the ID and then getting the user. And then we're creating the message, right? This is how the message looks. And then we're sending the message to Slack. And if I go to my Slack, right, this is the information that was sent to Slack. All right. Well, that's all I wanted to show you. And well, let me, one more thing is that the history, right? So if I go to the first run, right, we can see history for this run. And then the second run has, of course, its own data in history. So that's what this option does. Is it saves the data that the flow used. All right. Well, cool. That's what I wanted to show you. And just to summarize, we covered the fundamentals, but we talked about, how do you trigger a flow, and more specifically, you can do based on an event. You can do a schedule, API, and the helper flow. And of course, we didn't cover the other three options, but if you go to the YouTube channel, and I'll send a link to it, we have many videos that I did in the past about using the other ways to trigger a flow. Then we talked about the action cards, right? So these, an action card is when you call an action on a connector, right? So you have a connector and you can create a connection to it. And then we also have function cards, where this is to work with data, to numbers, text, objects. We only work with text, but again, other videos, we use other functions as well. And then we tested individual cards, and then we also tested the flow. We also, I showed you how you can choose fields if you don't need to show all the fields, and then also how to get help for a card. All right. Cool. Well, let me see if there are questions. So there's a question from John. Have you done a video that sends notification via Google Meet versus Slack? No, I have not done Google Meet. It's a cool idea. I'll add this idea to my list, and maybe I can do a tutorial or a KB or even a meetup like this about using Google Meet. I do have an example using Microsoft. I forget the name of the product that they have. Is it 365 or? Let me go to the Okta blog. I published a tutorial. Let me see here. Oh, Microsoft Teams. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so we have a tutorial that shows how to send the message to Microsoft Teams. But again, I think Google Meet is a cool idea, so thank you for suggesting that. So, all right. Well, I don't see any more questions, but let me show my let me show this slide again. If you have any questions, my email in that very first column. So I'll put it in the chat as well. So if you have any questions, and you might have questions after the event, so please don't hesitate to contact me. But other than that, thank you for joining today. I hope this was helpful. Again, you'll get a message tomorrow with a link to this, to YouTube. Yeah, thanks again. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.